Last Saturday, in the dark still of the early morning hours, the mortal remains of the greatest Bahamian who ever lived were placed in the back of a white funeral van which Bethel Brothers had sent to the Pindling home. So Lynden's widow and his children were gathered round. And realizing, of course, that their husband and father was leaving home for the last time, the burden of their loss weighed heavily upon them. After the body had been carefully secured, the rear doors of the van were closed, and slowly it began to move away. Tearfully, the family waved goodbye and then turned towards the house once more. All of the family, that is, except Obi. He had continued to stare at the departing van because something had caught his eye, and it seemed too unreal to be true. Calling out to his mother and sisters who had already turned away, Obi said, "Hey, you all see that?" Turning to see for themselves, Lady Pindling and Leslie and Michelle and Monique now saw what Obi had seen. And what they saw lifted their hearts in a way they could not have imagined possible just a moment before. Amidst their tears, smiles suddenly broke out, spreading quickly from face to face, because what they saw with their own eyes persuaded them that even in death, Lynden Pindling was still in touch. It was the license plate on the van, you see. Quite by accident, without any sort of theatrical calculation, Bethel Brothers had sent to the Pindling residence a van that just so happened to have as its license plate number, oh yes, the number 1010. And it will not have escaped your notice, I am sure, that this just so happens to be the 10th day following the passing of Sir Lynden Pindling. Your Excellencies, Right Honorable Prime Minister, visiting heads of government, distinguished members of the clergy, other dignitaries here present, my fellow Bahamians everywhere. I know that Lady Pindling and her children are gladdened by the presence here this morning of the heads of government, former prime ministers, and other foreign dignitaries who have traveled from afar to pay their final respects to their fallen brother. They will be more appropriately and formally introduced later in this program. So Lynden was deeply committed to CARICOM and the integration of the Bahamas into the Caribbean family. He was always fond of saying that the same boat had brought all of us into this part of the world, and that the only difference was that the boat had dropped some of us off further south than others, and that the Caribbean family is so well represented here this morning is a fitting tribute to the memory of a man who believed so deeply in the common cause and common destiny of the peoples of the West Indies and the Caribbean. I should also like to join with Obi in expressing appreciation to the Right Honorable Prime Minister and his government for the very great care and sensitivity which they have demonstrated all this week in relation to the arrangements for this state funeral and the events which preceded it. But while I have your attention, Prime Minister, permit me, if you please, a brief personal intervention which I make not on behalf of the Pindling family, but in my own right as a Bahamian who, like so many others, loved and admired Sir Lynden. That we are now to have a National Heroes Day is a most excellent idea for which you and your government are to be applauded. But Prime Minister, If I may, in the same way that the father of the American nation is accorded a special holiday dedicated solely to his memory, we as a people should expect no less for the father of the Bahamian nation. May I therefore respectfully suggest for your consideration, sir, that just as Columbus Day, a universe of turbulent conflict to which his destiny had tied him, it was at home, in the company of those he truly loved, that he could take a siesta from his labors and his battles. Any Bahamian who was ever downtown at 1 o'clock on any afternoon during Sir Lynden's tenure as Prime Minister can tell you that his car would be headed westward at that hour. No matter what was on the agenda that day, no matter how pressing the crisis might be, there was nothing in this world that was ever going to come between Sir Lynden and the luncheons he looked forward to enjoying every day of the week with his wife and family. Sir Lynden was so very proud of all his children, proud of their accomplishments, and of how well they had each turned out under the harsh glare of public scrutiny, which no other child in this Commonwealth has ever had to endure for so long. It was, he thought, a testimony to their own fortitude and good balance that they had come through it all so well. In 1997, when I was helping Sir Lynden prepare his farewell address to the House of Assembly, I well remember that there was one paragraph he was particularly concerned to get exactly right, and he kept changing it and changing it. It became clear to me after a while that he was far more concerned about this one paragraph than all the other sections of his speech recounting his many great historical accomplishments. And on the morning the House of Assembly met, when he whispered to me, "Man, I got that thing down pat now," I knew exactly the paragraph he was talking about. And what he had written with such loving care, and what he said in the House that day was this, and I quote, "As for my wife, Madam Speaker, a very special word, if I may. It has been my singular good fortune to have at my side from the time of my entry into politics in 1956 to my exit in 1997, a princess whose bearing, grace, and charm made her the toast of 4 continents, and a lady whose fortitude in the face of the most daunting adversities, and whose unwavering devotion to me and what I stood for contributed mightily to my survival and to my successes. To Marguerite, my wife, my lover, my homemaker, and my best friend of 41 years, let me say this then, that for her support, her understanding, her tender and constant care, and her boundless love and devotion, I am grateful beyond measure." Sir Lynden more than loved his wife, he adored her. His admiration of her was endless. She was his partner in love and in politics. She was the most loyal and valiant and unflinching of all his many soldiers. And if truth be told, the man whose own political instincts were so legendary trusted his wife's instincts far more than his own when it came to discerning the true motives of others. As a people, we owe a great deal to the Pindling.